just my quick tutorial on how to use my poor man's EMR, which is just written in a PowerShell script. Basically, it's going to simulate registering a patient and then being able to send an ADT, and then from that ADT, the Modality Worklist server displays results based on some automatic configuration for procedure codes. And then if you want, you can also create actual orders for procedure if you want, and test your Modality Worklist server with a little utility. So I'll just show you what this looks like. So first you have to extract the files, and I'm just going to extract them right here into my same folder on my desktop. So on my desktop, I have a folder called EMR Sim. And if I open that folder, there's my script files. I can go through what these are towards the end of the video, just not to waste your time if you just need a quick tutorial on this. Down at the bottom, these 4 files, these are your PowerShell scripts. So the first one I'm going to open, you could just open all of them if you wanted to, but if you right click on it, you have to click on Run as PowerShell, and you'll get this little window that pops up. So here's my EMR, right? Very simple EMR. But from here, I can do, basically go through some of the menu options. But at the same time, I probably want to start some other stuff. So I'll start the HL7 server just so you can see what that looks like. So I'm going to run the HL7 server. That's going to just run in a PowerShell window. It's not going to do anything until we send it some HL7. So I'll just leave this running over here. So my first step is I got to create a patient, right? So if I hit C to create a patient, if you hit a single dot on each one of these entries, it'll take the default that's in the brackets. And if you do 2 dots, it will skip the remaining fields and just use the defaults. So it makes it very fast to create your test patients. When you go to create a patient, it's going to automatically use a default, which is a test patient name. I've got a little CSV file with like 100 patient names in it, and it just grabs random patient names, addresses, phone numbers, and uses that to populate the way you get a little bit of diversity in your data. So if you hit 2 dots, it'll just take all the defaults. It doesn't ask you any more questions. You can see a lot of the tags. These are DICOM tags, by the way. A lot of them I'm leaving blank because, it's just obscure stuff we don't care about. But if you wanted to put a value in for those, you could. If you're putting this registration info to test different things. And that's pretty much all the DICOM tags that are supported for the patient level in Modality Worklist. Not much else that you could do at the patient level for Modality Worklist. So if I don't want to add another one, I just hit enter, and you can see it. It shows my current active record. It kind of caches it for me, so I can access a little bit easier. So for example, if I wanted to now send an ADT message for that patient, I would hit A for sending patient registration message. It knows I'm working with Patricia Martinez. If I said N for no, I could search for a different patient to send an ADT, but I'm just going to say yes. And I have to tell it where to send it. So I have to choose an HL7 destination. You can manage these. There's another screen. I'll show you what that looks like later, but I'm just going to select 0 because I want this to go to the ADT AE title. By the way, it's not really an AE title, right? It's the host name and TCP port. I'm just referencing it by AE title, just all in one table. So we'll use record 0, and that's going to go ahead and send the HL7. And you can see the HL7 server received it, processed it. We're good. So now we've got that patient registration. So my next step is we want to test the Modality Worklist server, right? Because one of the things we want to do is use only ADT registrations for point of care, like point of care ultrasound. So if we look at, I'm going to go into M for manage data, and I can do a search. So if we look at under searches, if I do an HL7, search my HL7 nodes, I have 2 nodes. I've got an ADT DMWL and an ORM DMWL. And you can see the labels all the way on the right under AE title. I'm just going to select 0 for ADT DMWL to cache that, right? So now it's cached in there. But then if I look at my auto ADT, this is what defines how we automatically generate an ADT message. So you can see here that I've got POCUS for abdomen, POCUS for neck. It's going to automatically generate an order based on ADT for those 2. Now that order is generated at query time. So when a query comes in with a patient ID, it's going to automatically generate that order. It's going to basically take that patient ID and say, oh, okay, somebody's querying ADT DMWL. I have to go and find these 3 studied these 3 accession number templates, and I'm going to use that to create an order for the patient for each one of those 3 and display it back to the modality. And it's all going to just happen in real time while the query is happening. And that's kind of what we're looking for. But I'm missing one here, so I'm just going to show you how I would add it. So I'm going to go back and hit I for insert, and we're going to insert a new auto ADT record. We're going to use auto ADT as the A title. And then I have to search for a procedure code that I want to use. So I'm going to use POCUS trauma, right? I had the abdomen, had the neck. I'm going to add the trauma. So now we have 3. There we go. So now we're going to have 3 that it could use. So if we go back and do a search on auto ADT, you can see I've got 3 different procedure types that it's going to create an ADT. From the ADT, it's going to create 3 different orders for each one of those different procedure types. Okay, so now that that's done, we're going to test to see if that works, right? So before we do that, though, we have to start our Modality Worklist server. So you're going to find that here. There's 2 services that have to be running. So we have to have our auto ADT has to be running. That's what's going to automatically generate from the Modality Worklist queries. So I'll just have this kind of running. We don't need to see the ADTs now. We already saw that. So I'll just run this right here. And then we also have to run our DICOM Modality Worklist server. And this is the actual, it's going to basically receive the Modality Worklist queries. So let's move this over here. So we're going to use port 104. I'm going to use verbose mode. It's going to ask me if I want to delay Modality Worklist for auto ADT. It basically slows down the Modality Worklist process to give it a chance to generate those ADT orders. In the real world, if this was a real solution, you would probably do it a little more elegantly, right? You would do this within the Modality Worklist server itself. It's because I'm using the binaries for Office Toolkit. It's a little bit easier to do it this way. So I'm just going to make it 2 seconds. That's probably even more than we would need, but actually, you know what? We'll make it 1 second, see if that works. All right, so Modality Worklist server is now running. My auto ADT service is running. So now if I hit D to perform a Modality Worklist query, I'm going to put in the patient's ID number, 1216759. I didn't have to memorize it. I'm just looking at the current active records. P for patient. There's my patient ID. I'm going to leave accession number, name, and modality blank. So we're going to use 127001 is fine, port 104. But we want to use ADT underscore DMWL because that's the one that triggers the auto creation of these orders. So if I hit enter, you can see on the bottom left, it generated the orders. On the bottom right, it processed the Modality Worklist query. And at the top, this is what my modality would see. So if I hit the space bar to page through these, you can see there's my second response, and then there's my third response. And you can see the accession numbers just auto-generated. Here you can see it used the abdomen, right? So we had the trauma, the abdomen, and the neck that I put in there, and that's it. So that worked, right? So it was able to create it from the by using the the ADT. Now I could also just create an order, right? So if I hit O to create an order, so I'm going to use the same patient ID that I've been working with. It's going to create a new accession number. We don't need a study instance UID. I'm just going to keep the same test doctor. But for the procedure, I'll use, I don't know, gastro scope. I'll use gas as the procedure code. You could change these fields if you want. It doesn't matter. I'm just making stuff up as I go here, just to kind of show you an example. Again, if I use 2 dots, it just skips the other fields. So in order to have an order, you have to have the order fields, but every order also has the requested procedure code. So this would be like a CPT code. So I'm just going to make up a CPT code, 70023. It's a CPT4. And the meaning of the code is endoscope. All right, so that's going to add that record. Now I also have to add a scheduled procedure step sequence. Same kind of thing. So I'll use VL for visible light. You could put a real date in. If you just put a date in the past, most modality worklist clients will work if it's a date in the past. Again, I'm just making this stuff up. What did I do? 70023. Not that it really matters too much, right? These are just random fields that are going to be sent to my modality. All right, and finally, I need a scheduled protocol code sequence. Again, these are all just required fields. And they're not required, but it's just best practice to provide all these different sequences. All right, so it's just going to confirm everything that I entered. That's it. It's now created the order. Now I can send the ORM. Now I'm going to move this window over here so you can see the HL7 service. So if I hit R to create the ORM, it knows I'm working with accession 29443759. If I say no, I could search for a different one, but I'm going to say yes because that's the one that I want to send. I have to tell it where to send it. So I'm going to send it to number 1, which is my ORM server, right? So I have an ADT server. Then I also created one for ORM. You could create more if you wanted to. They're all really just going to the same window on the bottom left because it's just a simulator. But that's it, right? So it just created that ORM message. You can see it processed it at the bottom. And it actually just created the modality worklist entry. So it automatically sends it into the worklist server. And now, if I want to perform a query using the modality worklist server, I'm going to, in this case, I'm going to leave the patient ID blank and the accession number. We're just going to use the name just to show you that you could do this. And you just use an asterisk as the wildcard in DICOM. This was a VL or visible light study. So let's see if that works. All right, we did not get a response. Let's try again. We'll try this time just querying everything. There we go. It worked like that. So it didn't like something in my query. So we can try, oops, I didn't mean to do that, but let's just try using the accession number this time. So the accession number was 29443759. There it is. It worked on the accession number. I think it was the VL that screwed it up. It didn't query it correctly as VL. So that's it. So that's how I can test my server. If you want to clear the cache, you just hit L. It'll clear that cache of all the current active records. If I go into manage data, delete doesn't work, by the way. I have it in there, but I didn't put a delete in there. But I can just manage these tables, right? So if I just want to look at what my orders are, right, I can go in here, do a query. There's a couple of orders that I have. There's that gastro that we just did. And I can select it. I can look at my patients. I can look at my HL7. And I was talking earlier, I could do an insert on HL7. So I could create a new HL7 server. So we'll call this one test HL7. We'll make this one port 6000. That's it. So if I go and do a search on HL7, you can see my other records in there, right? When you're done, we'll go back. I'll hit Q to quit. That's it. I'm out. So looking at the other files in here, just to show you what's going on here, I talked about the database already, right? That's where our database files are. So everything that I did, it was updating these CSVs, right? So for example, if I look at HL7, there's my 3 records, right? It added that 3rd record. The way that it works with those tables, you have to have a definition for the table. And it looks like this. I just did it based on DICOM, right? So you have a tag, a VR for the tag, a description, and then I have some instructions, default key, data grid. I'll tell you what those are. So if I look at, for example, patient, right? So if I look at patient, right, there's the tag number, and then you get the VR from DICOM, So if you were adding another DICOM tag, for example, you just have the description is just whatever the description is, and then you can have instructions to tell somebody what they're supposed to do there. You got a default value, and then the key if it's the primary key. So for example, the patient ID is the primary key on patient. The one at the end here for data grid, that tells it what I want to display, right? So if you don't like what I'm displaying, you can change these numbers on the end. You can change the order. You could add more, right? So I could, if I wanted to, for patient, let's say I also want to show the admitting diagnosis description, right? So I could do that if let's see, I have 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so I could make it a 4, right? I'll show you what that looks like. And then you've got these other DICOM fields. But just to show you, for order, that one's a little more complicated, as you get past the patient. Auto means that that whatever field that is auto-generated using a random number. So that's why our accession number has a random number, the patient ID has a random number. But you can see here, this one says, for key, it says patient instead of PK. That means that it references the patient. So that just means don't use this tag twice, right? It says go look at the patient. Go look at the patient field to go get the rest of the information. That's how I kind of do a poor man's join. It's a poor man's database, really. But just to show you, I just made that little change in that table. So if I go into the EMR screen again, right? So if I go to manage, do search, we're going to search patient. So you can see I've got the admitting diagnosis description in there now on the end. And I can search by it too, right? It'll automatically search by that field. So for example, let's do another patient search. I'm going to put percent duck, and it finds them, right? Because they both were bitten by a duck. All right. So that's pretty much it. I guess the other folders I should tell you, if you're still watching, the find folder is whenever a cfind comes in, it's going to drop the dump file for the cfind message, the DICOM file, into the find directory. That's how it reads in the patient ID that was queried, and it knows how to process it and figure out what to do with it. The HL7 is this is where your HL7 messages are going to fall. So for example, after they're processed, it goes into a process folder. If it doesn't get processed, it's just going to stay in the main folder. Once it's processed, it drops into processed. So you can go back and look at these messages if you want. And then going back up here, Office is the binaries that I'm using for Office. So there's some DLLs and binaries in here that it's calling from the PowerShell. Nothing too complicated. The work directory is when you do a DICOM Modality Worklist query, this is where it drops the file. So you get a dump file of the query that you're doing, and then it gets converted to a DCM file to be submitted to the DICOM Modality Worklist server. And then the response comes back, and it uses it just displays the response as raw text. I'm not doing any processing for that. And then I've got some functions in here. So all the stuff that's my simple little poor man's database is in this database folder, and then DICOM Modality Worklist functions, HL7, and then anything for the UI. So DICOM Modality Worklist, HL7 stuff, the database, and then the user interface. That's it. Pretty straightforward. If you have any questions, let me know. Thank you.